Welcome to everyone. Can I just have an indication that people can hear me? Maybe you could wave your hands or something. Great. Des, nice to see you there in Florida, I believe. And nice to have you as a visitor, and greetings to everyone else. I'm not going to go through everyone's names because I'll miss out someone. But this is Wednesday, middle of Chanukah, 13th of December, I think. And this is a newsletter subscriber shiur that we do from time to time in appreciation of people who join the website and subscribe to the newsletter. And I'll start by thanking those who have made donations to the charity that we have, which is located on the website. And although, as I've made plain many times before, I've never solicited any donations, but I certainly express my appreciation, and it keeps us going and publishing, running the website, and sort of as appreciation for that, I try to do a shiur for the people who subscribe to that, more or less every festival, every Yom Tov if I can. Thank you to Bina, my daughter, who's my amazing PA and sets this all up. Thanks to Ariel, who's monitoring and handling the tech side of this in Cape Town. Does a great job keeping us going and keeping our technology working. So let's talk about Chanukah, and I'd like to share with you an idea, an amazing idea, actually, quite an astounding idea, which I haven't spoken about before, and try to elucidate that and explain it as clearly as I can, and leave you with a little mystery at the end, okay? A little challenge. Why should I do all the work? I'll leave you a little bit of the work to do. And I will, you're welcome to send your answers or your solutions to this little challenge to the email address at the website as well. By the way, Des, I don't know if you saw the New England Journal this week had a review of electronic technology for diabetes. Oh, you got it. Okay. All right. Not a very detailed or technical review, but at least a little update on technology. Okay. Anyway, back to Chanukah. So here's an idea that we'll begin with, which is an amazing idea and needs a lot of thought. The Gaon of Vilna, as I'm sure most of you know, the outstanding genius of Torah commentary in the last couple hundred years, the Gaon died in 1797, so you're going back to that generation, in a collection of works called the Likutim, which you'll find, by the way, with the commentary of Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, again, a later authority also of stupendous proportions, who wrote, again, classic works that we use today. The Gaon says something about Chanukah which is striking and needs a lot of thought. And as is his way, doesn't explain, just says the idea. Here's what he says. He says the 8 days of Chanukah, as you know, we say Hallel, right? We say Hallel, which is the service of Hallel. We say the whole Hallel on Chanukah. The Gaon says the following thing. He says the 8 days of Hallel on Chanukah are a replacement for the Hallel that we don't say on the 6 days of Pesach and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That's what he says. Now, first of all, let's clear clearly what he's saying and see if we can think this through together. As you probably know, on a festival, there's a Torah mitzvah to say Hallel. Hallel is a praise, thanks, glorification of Hashem. By the way, for those who have a little philological interest, the word Hallel in Hebrew is closely related to the word Hilo, which means light. Hallel means really shining a spiritual light on things. The Hebrew word be Hilo Nero Ale Roshi, with the surrounding of his light around my head. By the way, the word Hilo in Hebrew, which is the light that surrounds the head, is nothing other than the English word halo. What I mean is the English word halo is simply a transliteration of the Hebrew word hilo, which means the halo of light that surrounds the head. Anyway, Hallel is related to that, phonetically related to that as well. It's a shining of a spiritual light in appreciation, glorification. That's Hallel. The Hallel that we say on the festival, we say, for example, on Sukkot, we say every day, we say Hallel. But strikingly, there's a number of days we don't say Hallel, even though it's a festival. Pesach, we say it on the first 2 days. But on the 6 days, this last 6 days of Pesach, or shall I say the first day, And the next 6 days of Pesach, we don't say it. Technical reason is that the 6 days of Pesach have something in common, unlike Sukkot. The 6 days of Sukkot, each one has a different order of sacrifice, and therefore it's considered a different day, and so the Hallel is said on Sukkot. Pesach has another reason. We don't say the Hallel, but be that as it, we don't say the full biblical Hallel on 6 days of Pesach. And similarly, on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we don't say it. Why don't we say Hallel on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? Well, Rosh Hashanah, the Gemara itself asks that question and answers by saying that the books of life and death are opened. Who could say Hallel? In other words, Hallel, you're praising Hashem and glorification. It's ecstatic. By the way, we have a little echo of this every day in the Psukkah de Zimra, which is the verses or psalms, shall I say, that are part of the morning service should be said as song. They're a type of Hallel, actually. Psukkah de Zimra actually means the verses of song. So it's a singing, a resonant singing of praise. Who could do that when the books of life and death are open on Yom Kippur? So we don't say, by rights we should, but we don't do it for that reason. Yom Kippur also, for a similar reason on Yom Kippur, which is the final closing of the din, we don't say Hallel, even though it's a festival, even though Yom Kippur, by the way, should have all the celebration of a festival, true, it's life and death, but it's an incredible celebration of atonement and forgiveness. Actually, what's brought is that Yom Kippur, the three elements of Yom Kippur are spread out over 3 days. The day of Yom Kippur itself, which is an otherworldly experience, we celebrate on Yom Kippur. The meals of Yom Kippur, we celebrate on Purim. Let me remind you that Yom HaKippurim, which is Yom Kippur, actually means the day that is like Purim, right? Yom HaKippurim. So Purim is a day where we celebrate in tremendously jovial fashion. We celebrate the meals that we're not eating on Yom Kippur. There's other angles on that, but that's one. And the Hallel of Yom Kippur, we say on Chanukah, as we said, as the Gaon says, the Hallel that we don't say on Yom Kippur because of the fear of the awe of the din, of the judgment, we say it on Chanukah. So let's say that idea again, and then we'll try to descend into explanation. The 6 days, the 8 days on which we should say Hallel, but don't. 6 days of Pesach, we don't say Hallel, and the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. When do we say those? When are we mashlim? When do we pay back, so to speak, the saying the Hallel? 8 days of Chanukah. Now, I mean, what does this mean? What is being said here? Chanukah, Pesach, Chanukah. What's the connection? Pesach, as you all know, is one of what we call the Moadim. The Moadim are Pesach, Shavuos, Shavuot, Sukkot, and Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Those are the Torah festivals mandated by the Torah. And then there are 2 rabbinic festivals, so-called post-biblical festivals that were added at the very end of the prophetic era. And after the end of the prophetic era, Purim was added by the tail end of the prophets. Mordechai and Esther were borderline prophets. On the one hand, they were prophets. On the other hand, they were simply divinely inspired. Borderline. That's why they wrote a book which is part of the Torah, but on the other hand, it doesn't mention Hashem's name. It's a book that has a Persian name, right? Purim, which means the luck of the draw. It's a hidden book. It's borderline prophecy. It describes a miracle, but unlike the other books of the Torah, it describes a hidden miracle. No dead people being revived, no sea splitting, no manna falling from heaven. Couldn't sleep one night. He had a wife. She was Jewish. He didn't know she was Jewish. A whole series of political intrigue events which led from Jewish destruction to Jewish salvation, but borderline. And 150 years later, during the Greek era, that was the Persian era, but when the Greeks took over from the Persians and persecuted the Jews, that was already a completely post-prophetic era. Matityahu and the Hashmonaim, no prophets among them at all, deep into the darkness of a post-prophetic era. And then they instituted Hanukkah. So the 2 post-biblical festivals, or if you like to put things in Kabbalistic terminology, the festivals that represent the legs. The legs are outside the body. The body ends, as the Arizal tells us, where birth takes place. Where the body ends when a woman is giving birth, the legs are irrelevant, right? She can't walk, her legs are cold, the legs are irrelevant. Where the body ends, new life begins. That's where the legs are extraneous to that. And festivals of Purim and Chanukah are the legs extraneous. In some sense, they carry the rest of the festivals forward through history, but they're the post-biblical, rabbinic, ordinated festivals. Now, what is the connection between Pesach, 6 days of Pesach, that have their fulfillment in Chanukah? What's the connection? What were the rabbis doing in instituting a festival that pays back the Hallel that should have been said on Pesach? And not only that, but also 2 days, not to forget, for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as well. What is the connection between Pesach and Chanukah? And for the same price, what's the connection between an aspect of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Chanukah as well? And that's what we need to try to explain, to fathom. To do this, let's take a little tour through a classic area, some of which we've discussed on other occasions, but let's try to clarify it, and then circle back. I'm warning you, this needs thought. This is not a simple exercise, but let's try and do that together and see if we can gain a new understanding. You know that there's a wonderful and classic discussion, argument, if you like, between Rashi and the Ramban about a juxtaposition in the Torah. This is relatively well known, but I mention it as a way of circling back to understand our subject. The subject is that in Parshas Nasoi, which describes the rich gifts that the princes leading each tribe bring for inauguration of the Mishkan, and let me remind you that inauguration in Hebrew is called Chanukah. Chanukah means inauguration, dedication. After all, Chanukah means what the Chashmonaim, what the Maccabees, what they did. They dedicated, or in their context, rededicated the altar and the service of the temple after the Greeks had defiled it. As you all know, finding the flask of oil that was still pure, using that to reignite the menorah that had been extinguished by the Greeks, contaminated and extinguished. So Chanukah means dedication. Dedication in the sense of inauguration. You probably know that the Hebrew word, that's the root of the word Chanukah, is chinuch. Chinuch means what we translate loosely in English as education. Education means the dedication or inauguration of a child's intellectual program, right? That's what education is. It's the introduction to the ongoing introduction to the path of intellectual development. So Chanukah means inauguration. And in the Chanukah Samizbech, the inauguration of the Mishkan, that sanctuary, which was in English called the tabernacle, the precursor to the temple, which the Jewish people would later build in Israel, that mobile sanctuary that they were traveling through the desert, the princes of each tribe brought a gift as a dedication offering for the sanctification, inauguration, ignition, if you like, of the Mishkan. The next parsha in the Torah, immediately following that description, is the mitzvah that Aaron was given to light the menorah. The great 7-branched menorah that was miraculously lit. The western light always burned through the night, even if there wasn't enough oil. That's what the high priest or the priest would light in the Mishkan and later in the Beis HaMikdash. Aaron HaKohen, the high priest, Aaron, was given the mitzvah to light the menorah. The obvious question is, what's the sequence of events here? Nothing accidental in Torah. Why is the description of these men bringing their representative gifts, inauguration of the Mishkan, followed by Aaron's mitzvah to light the menorah? Rashi picks up on this question and quotes the Medrash. The Medrash says, the juxtaposition must be this. When Aaron saw that these people were bringing their dedication offerings, he was tremendously distressed, just to the point of distraction, because neither he nor his tribe, the Levim, the Kohanim Levim, neither he nor his tribe had a part to play in that dedication. And being that he was a man whose every fiber of his existence was given to service of Hashem, here's a moment where he's not serving, he's a passive bystander, that drove him to distraction. Hashem, seeing his distress, said, Chayecha, which is an outstanding language of, so to speak, God taking an oath, your share is greater than theirs because you light the menorah. And when Aaron heard that, he was appeased. He has the work of lighting the menorah in the Mishkan, and everything was fine. So let me run it by you again. The princes of each tribe representing their tribe, all of the tribes of the Jewish people are bringing their inauguration gifts. Aaron is standing by, tremendously dismayed that he has no part to play. Hashem tells him, don't worry, you light the menorah, and therefore you have a part to play. He's appeased, and that explains the juxtaposition. That sounds like a good explanation, but the Ramban attacks it mercilessly. Of course, it's not Rashi's fault. Rashi is simply quoting Midrashic statements. And I'll leave you, this is not the mystery I want to leave you with, but it is a worthwhile exercise. What does Rashi mean By the time the Ramban analyzes this Rashi, there's not a brick left intact. I mean, he demolishes Rashi's explanation totally. And I'll leave you to just Rashi knew what he was talking about, obviously. But listen to what the Ramban says. The Ramban says, Aaron is standing there dismayed because he has no role to play. Had Aaron forgotten that the whole service of the sanctuary is him? What do you mean he's standing there distressed because he has no role to play? The whole work of the sanctuary, of the Mishkan, is Aaron and his tribe. The Kohanim, they do everything. They offer the sacrifices, from the morning sacrifice to the afternoon sacrifices, the Yom Kippur sacrifices. They bring the incense, which is the highest, Kabbalistically, the highest sacrifice. The whole Mishkan revolves around them, right? And not only that, Aaron, representing his tribe and the Jewish people, is the only human being who goes into the Holy of Holies in the sanctuary one day in Yom Kippur, and he's not even regarded as human at that point. I mean, the whole thing is him. The whole work of the Mishkan is the Kohanim. He's standing there. On the contrary, these men are bringing a one-time offering, and then they're out of there. He's a constant, daily, hour-to-hour representative of the function of the Mishkan, and he's dismayed because there's a one-time event he's not participating in. Right? I'm sure you can all hear the question. And furthermore, says the Ramban, why was he appeased by the mitzvah of lighting the menorah? So you got one more function. Again, you got 55 functions in the Mishkan. The whole thing is you. You're doing all the sacrifices, the incense, the whole thing is you. But you're distressed because you don't have this one-time offering. So Hashem says, don't worry, you light the menorah. Now everything's fine. So now you got 56 functions. What is going on? Right? And the Ramban lists a whole list of questions, and as I said, by the time he's finished, there's not a word left intact. Now I leave you to reconstruct Rashi, but listen to the Ramban's answer. Pay attention. This is a classic and important idea, and what I'm going to share with you now, some people have said is the most important thing they've ever heard. So mark these words. Ramban says, Aaron was not dismayed because he didn't have a role to play. What he wanted was Chanukah. He didn't want a role to play. He wanted Chanukah. Chanukah means inauguration, dedication. That's the moment of ignition. If you miss the moment of ignition, you're nothing. Again, the moment of conception is critical. Once conception has taken place, you will struggle mightily to make a change. In the moment of conception, when the parents' genes fuse, in that instant, the child's future is laid down. The color of his eyes and the shape of his nose and the whole sequence of his life in compressed essence. To be sure, nothing revealed yet. We'll take a pregnancy and we'll take a birth for it all to be revealed. But in that moment of ignition, in that precious moment of origin, in that moment, everything, our Kabbalistic sources say that the world was not created in 6 days. The world was created in one moment of ignition and conception. It took 6 days to reveal what was there in that moment, just like it takes a pregnancy to start expressing what the genes have laid down in that moment of conception. That's called Chanukah. Chanukah is a moment of ignition, and that's precious beyond words. Aaron was not longing for a role to play. He wanted Chanukah. These people were bringing a gift that switches on. The gifts that they bring, inauguration and dedication of the Mishkan, that's a moment of conception that will never come again. If you take a person and you make a cut in his body, it's not too serious. But you make a cut that size in a fetus while it's developing, much more critical. And the moment of conception, you can move a molecule and have much more far-reaching consequences down the line. You can never replace that moment. The beginning, the pure beginning of some of the commentaries say, listen carefully, beautiful idea. Why did the Kohanim need pure oil for the menorah? There's an explicit halacha, explicit law in Judaism, that for a public function, you can use impure oil. You can use, that's called tumah hutra b'tzibur. When it's a public function, like lighting the menorah, which is an effort of the Jewish people, represents the whole Jewish people, you can use impure oil for that. There's no law against it. What was the big deal that they had to look for pure oil? And the answer is amazing. The answer is, yeah, you can use impure oil, but if it's the moment of origin, the moment of beginning, that has to be pure. If you're going to begin with something that's not 100% pure, that's b'di'evet. Okay, it's allowed. You've contaminated the source. Once the conception is contaminated, you'll never get it right after that. In other words, yeah, it's allowed. It's allowed. But if you're going to strive for purity, that's got to be the moment of origin. And therefore, what Aaron wanted was to be there in the moment of ignition and origin. That's what he was craving. And Hashem said to him, Aaron, your share is greater than theirs. You have a Chanukah. And I'm not referring to your lighting of the menorah in the Mishkan. I'm referring to your great-grandchildren, the Kohanim and your tribe, who will relight the menorah in a contaminated temple. after the Greeks have defiled it and contaminated, your grandchildren will come in and they'll purify it, and they'll light a menorah. They'll light the menorah of Chanukah. We're not talking about the menorah in the Mishkan. You know why? Because this will not last forever. This light in the Mishkan that will become a light in the temple will be wiped out by the Babylonians and wiped out later by the Romans and the Greeks and contaminated, and therefore it's not going to last forever. This is a light which is supernal, which is miraculous in the temple, but it's time bound. But when they extinguish that light, your great-grandchildren will come and institute a mitzvah of Chanukah, and that little candle will burn in Jewish windows until the Mashiach arrives. Your light will be nothing compared to theirs. It will be a tiny light lit in a Jewish window in the darkness of winter. But that light's going to last till Mashiach comes. And when Aaron heard that, he was appeased. He wasn't appeased because he had one more function in the Mishkan. He was appeased because he realized that he had a dedication greater than the dedication of this moment. And why is it greater? Because it's not a dedication. It's a rededication after contamination. It's a phase 2 dedication, which is nothing compared to the first, but it's the one that makes it to the end. Now, what does this mean? Let's try and go into this a little bit and try and understand it. And to do this, we need to go back to the first page, what's known as the Eitz Chaim. The Eitz Chaim is that great Kabbalistic commentary on the Zohar, the classic central source work of Kabbalah. And what's written there is that, again, without going into too much detail, is that every light that shines twice. The first light is infinitely powerful. It blows open a space where there was no space before. It's perfect and safe and perfect illumination. And as soon as it's done that, the light disappears. It's done its work, but it leaves a longing, aching emptiness, a darkness craving the ecstasy of the light that was there before. And that longing, that emptiness, brings back a second light. The second light is nothing compared to the first. Nothing. It's almost invisible. But it's the one that lasts, the one that's intended, the one that remains. What does this mean? And here comes a message that is, as I said, some people have said, the most important thing they ever heard, more than life-saving. Life goes in 2 stages. The first stage, easy. The first stage is inspiring. It's done for free, charges the batteries, illuminates you, and it's perfect. And in that moment of, shall we say, conception, in that explosion of potential, nothing can go wrong. And it lasts long enough to convince you that it will last forever. Then it's taken away. And then it leaves a disappointment, a fear, a darkness, an abandonment. But that's what brings the light back a second time. But the second time the light comes back, it's when you make it happen, where you develop and you shine the light. It's nothing compared to the light of perfection. You never achieve in actuality what was there in potential, but it's the one that's real, the one that you've constructed. Let me give you a few examples, because there's no theme more basic than this. My friends, if it's on the first page of the Eitz Chaim, it's in the conception of the Eitz Chaim. And if it's the moment of conception of an idea in Torah, everything follows from this. You know, here's one example, a national example. How did the Jewish people begin? What's the conception of the Jewish people? They're in Egypt in utter darkness, and they see 10 plagues, each one higher, crescendo experience of miraculous plagues in Egypt. No human being had ever experienced that level. When they get to that 10th midnight, when the firstborn are destroyed, where God himself is doing it, not through any agents. Ani Hashem, I myself, no angels, no intermediaries. The Jewish people experienced that. 7 days later at the sea, they experience even more than that when the sea splits. An pinnacle of spiritual revelation that is beyond description. And at that moment, Hashem drops them in the desert. He says, you get the idea, now you do it yourself. Stage 2. Stage 1, it's done for you. Here's what Hashem says. God says to the Jewish people, I want to demonstrate to you how we destroy darkness, how we peel away the layers of Egyptian contamination. 10 layers of evil in the world, I'm going to show you how to destroy them all. And one by one, the plagues destroy and purify and detoxify the Egyptian toxic reality. Then God says to the Jewish people, get the idea? Now you do it yourself, and I'll meet you at Sinai. You know, the day of Pesach, the word Pesach in Hebrew means to leap over. Pass over. Pesach means to leap over. On the night of Pesach, you leap to the 50th level for free. The Jews were slaves, no spiritual merits, had done nothing to deserve it. God took them to that level. And then he said to them, get the idea? Now you walk through the 50 steps yourself, through a desert, which is a place of death forces. Now you count the days. Now no leaping. This is called fly now, pay later. You need to be inspired first. You need to be lifted to that level, beyond your capacity. But then the world is for you to become real. Hashem didn't create the world to demonstrate what he's capable of doing. There's no point in that. He could do anything. It was created for you to demonstrate what you can do. But you don't know what you can do unless you've been shown. And therefore you get taken to the highest level. The month of Pesach is Nisan. Nisan means miracles. The zodiac of the month is the sheep. That's the passive animal that just follows. Lech teich acharai bamidbar. You followed me into a desert. The next month of Iyar, the difficult time of the counting of the Omer, that's the bull, Taurus. That doesn't follow at all. That develops its own willful strength. Opposite, completely. And only when you've been through those two, the inspiration that you were given, when you followed, and then when you took the lead, once you've learned to harmonize those two, you get to the third month, which is Sivan, which is Te'omim, Gemini. And the perfect harmony between the two. The two tablets of the law, written and oral law, Moshe and Aaron, Hashem and us, all the harmonies coming together. You can only enter a relationship if you enter it with content. If the giver is all and the receiver is nothing, that's not a relationship. That's a mockery and an embarrassment for the receiver. A relationship is only where two parties bring their content to the relationship. And therefore, the first element is the giver. That's Hashem does everything. And then he steps back and he says, now you build yourself. And then we'll meet as lovers and equals at Sinai. And that's the third stage of perfect harmony between the two. Wherever you look, you'll see the same thing. Take an individual example. The child, the baby, child in the womb, he's taught the whole Torah. The child has an angel, teaches him the whole Torah, has a light lit above his head where the tefillin are worn. He sees from one end of the world to the other. He has cosmic wisdom. He knows his future. All humans. At the point of birth, he gets a cruel blow and he's shipped into knowing nothing, and he's born as a simple baby who knows nothing. Why would God teach a child the whole Torah to make him forget it when he's going to need it? Phase 1, phase 2. Locked into your subconscious is all the wisdom that you'll ever need because you had it once. But it leaves an aching emptiness as searching for wisdom. And that's why when you learn something spiritually true, you don't feel you're learning, you feel you recognize it. When you hear something spiritually true, you say, that's right. How do you know it's right? Because it's resonating. And when it's personally right, it feels even more potent. It's a good teacher, by the way. A good teacher doesn't indoctrinate. A good teacher educates, draws it out. In the Talmud, when the disciples ask the master a question, he doesn't answer. He says, what do you think? A good teacher draws it out of you. It's inside. It's innate, deep in your consciousness is the ability to resonate because you have it within. And it continues. When the child's born, there are also two phases. This is a endlessly refracting pattern. When the child's born, there are two phases of life. There's childhood and adulthood. Childhood is a time of expanded consciousness, unbelievable potential. Children think they're going to do everything and everything. Teenagers think they're going to be world's greatest everything. Every 18-year-old young man is totally convinced that he's going to be the world's greatest everything, no question about it. But when he's 28 and 38 and 48 and 58, is he not the world's greatest anything? So most men keep right on fantasizing, that they are the world's greatest. They just didn't do it yet, but, and others just get depressed. But the point is the world closes in on you. Because potential is phase 1. Potential is always perfect. Potential is always endless. But it's only potential. When you wake up in the morning, wow, amazing. Blue sky. You can canoe on the lake and swim in the river, climb the mountain, ride the horses. Well, not all of those. So the immature phase 1 individual spends half the day trying to figure out which one he should do, and whichever one he does, he's convinced the others would have been better. The mature individual chooses one and does it. The others become irrelevant. It disappear, they're irrelevant. Potential always is all options. The beauty of potential is infinite power. The curse of potential is it's only seed energy, it's only potential. The beauty of achievement, of bringing birth to the world, the female work, is that you have a life in the world. But the curse is only this one. All the others that could have been will never be. That's how the world always, two phases. Phase 1, potential, which is infinite and endless. We always refer to God as male, endless potential. The world is always female. All the words for the earth are feminine in Hebrew. That's the word, phase 1 and phase 2. And all life experiences are like that. What is marriage? Kabbalistically, husband and wife are fused at the back in the spiritual world. One being that cannot see each other. And then they're ripped apart and brought to the world to marry, facing each other. And building a relationship and creating it themselves, phase 2. Phase 1 is perfect, it's given for free. And you need that. The Talmud says the reason you long to marry is because you're longing for the part of yourself that you lost. You can only long for something that's part of you. You can't long for something that's got nothing to do with you. Why would you long for it? You long for spiritual wisdom because it was part of you. You long for a marriage partner because she was once, or he was once part of you. Incidentally, that's why the Talmud calls your Torah wisdom your spouse. Both of them are parts of the self that have been lost, a complementary half of the self that's been lost. And so ever you look, and not only that, when marriage itself begins, there are two phases again. There's a phase called romance and a phase called love. What is romance? It's that experience that happens before marriage. What about after marriage? About 2.5 hours after marriage, Gone. Phase 1 and phase 2, it's necessary. You need that. You need the explosion of potential that is phase 1. But it doesn't last. It's taken away from you. But then you build love. As Rodessler points out, we don't even have a word for romance in Hebrew. We have a word for love. The word for love in Hebrew is ava. That means giving. And giving always is where you love. And you can only love after intense giving. And that's why parents always love their children more than the children love the parents. Parents always love their children more than the children love the parents, because that's the direction of the giving. You love where you invest yourself, and of course you do. You put yourself in, and there it is you. Your children are an extension of yourself. And therefore it's an experience of self. When a child's in danger, you feel it in your gut, because an extension of you. You feel it more intensely sometimes than if you'd be in danger. And therefore, phase 1 is romance. It's necessary, but it's taken away. Phase 2 is the second light. Has none of the explosive potential of phase 1, but it's real. It's after walking through the desert of life's experience. The Rambam says that life is like standing on a dark plain on a stormy night. You stand there beaten by the wind and lashed by the rain and hopelessly lost. And at your moment of greatest despair, there's a flash of lightning. And by that flash, you see the road clearer than by day. But as you see it, the light disappears. And the rest of the night is walking through the storm on memory alone of a flash that you once saw. He says some people see more flashes and some people see less, but no one walks in the light. Phase 1, phase 2. Phase 1 is the flash of light. Phase 2 is walking through the desert on the memory. How does a little child learn to walk? His father picks him up by the hands and he stands on his feet. And what an exhilarating moment. The child standing on his feet and he takes his first step and he can't fall because his Abba's holding his hands. But as he feels the thrill of that moment, Abba lets go. And then he stands there terrified and alone and abandoned by the one who put him in that situation. But that's when he learns to walk. And only after he takes that first frightened step on his own can he rush into his father's arms and realize that when his father let go, he was showing him more love than when he held his hands. Okay, so life has two phases. And it pays to know this. Because if you don't know it, where the romance goes, you think you married the wrong girl. You're not the wrong girl. This is phase 2. Now, history has two phases. Phase 1, prophetic, miraculous. That lasted until Purim. Purim was the tail end of the prophetic experience and the miraculous experience. Purim borderline, as we said before. 150 years later, Chanukah seals that experience forever. No prophecy, no miracles. Chanukah was the last wave goodbye from the miraculous world. These candles will burn for 8 days, and then you will see no more until the messianic reignition. So it comes out like this. Again, history, two phases. By the way, think carefully, you'll realize all Torah is like this. How many times were the tablets of the law given, the luchos? Twice. The first ones shattered, as always. Always like that. Adam and Eve in a garden, Adam and Chava in a garden, idyllic and perfect, exiled, put into a world of death to fight their way back. All experience is first when it's done for you. How did you learn to ride a bicycle? Your father ran along holding the saddle and it was amazing, right? Unbelievable. Then you look back and you saw he wasn't holding. But that's where you learn to ride. And therefore, phase 1, God is doing it for us. He's revealing himself in the world. There's miracles and prophecy that goes till about 2,300 years ago. And then he steps back and he says, you get the message, now you do it. Now you walk what the Ramban calls the Midbar Ha'amim, the desert of the nations. Genocidal, traumatic history, century after century of apparently hopeless Jewish existence to get to a messianic light, which is the one that we've nurtured through the darkness. And therefore, Aaron was given 2 lights. The first light, you go into the Mishkan, you light the menorah. It will burn miraculously. It will be incredible, it'll be amazing. It'll be prophetic and miraculous. That, my friend, will not last. That's going to be destroyed. People destroy the temple and extinguish that light. But your grandchildren, they'll come into a defiled temple. and they'll light a second menorah. They'll light the one that they do. No miracles here. Jews are going to light that light in a Jewish window, and that's going to burn throughout the messianic darkness, pre-messianic darkness. And that's the one that's an appeasement. To know that you've ignited phase two. Phase one, you need to be pure enough to see it and hear it, to admit that light into the world. But phase two is the one you do. And that's why Hashem made an oath, yours is greater than theirs. And that was the appeasement, and that was the understanding. And that, my friends, is why Chanukah was Kohanim. Rambam says, who were the ones who defeated the Greeks? The Kohanim Gedolim, the ones who operate in the temple. And of course, they're the ones who defeated the Greeks. The Greeks were into spiritual contamination, into intellect and philosophy, not spirituality that transcends the intellect. And that's why it had to be Kohanim that defeat them. Right? And that's why it had to be the Kohanim who light the lights in the menorah, because the Greeks represent darkness. What do we say, Lananissim? Lashkicham terasecha, to make you forget Torah. That's what the Greeks were not genocidal. Not at all. They want to kill Jews. They just wanted to make you Greek. And therefore, lashkicham terasecha, to make you forget Torah. And the Kohanim are the ones who teach Torah. And they reignite that light in a Greek darkness. Choshech zi yavon. When the Torah refers to darkness, that's referring to Greece. Means it's a spiritual, intellectual, philosophical light and spiritual darkness. Okay, now, let's go back to the Gon. Pesach, stay with me carefully, please. Pesach, there are 2 times the Torah was given. The Torah was given twice. Phase 1, phase 2. Phase 1 was Pesach. The Jewish people taken out of Egypt in a blaze of miracles, an escalating experience to Sinai, where the Exodus experience comes to its completion, and they're given Torah in miraculous form. The Lucha is coming down from the heavens with miraculous. The Maral says that the written and the oral law were both written on the tablets. There was no oral law. There's nothing to figure out and to calculate yourself. It was all given. What could be clearer than God himself appearing to the Jewish people? That's given of the Torah of phase 1. But that doesn't last. That will end with the ending of the prophetic era. The Torah will be given, book after book will be given. The prophets will reveal 24 books of Torah. And then when you get to Chanukah, at the tail end, at Purim, at the tail end of that experience, you'll enter phase 2 where the Torah is not given anymore. Now we enter a phase of the second giving of the Torah, and that's called the oral law. Judaism's greatness is not the written law. The written law belongs, the Muslims have the same thing. Their religion's based on the same book. The Christians based on the same book. God appeared at Sinai. No one denies that. The whole West accepts that. But where we differ is the oral law. When the written laws no longer manifest, there are no prophets to deliver the word anymore. And now the sages step in. They create their own Torah and they create their own festivals. That's the secret of Purim and Chanukah. They mirror the Torah. The Torah creates the festivals, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Each one a blaze of miraculous revelation. A new miracle and a new aspect of Torah is received in the world. And then that goes dark. And then the sages step in and they make their own festivals and their own Torah. They write a book of Esther, which is their own. They tell a story of Chanukah, which is their own. They institute festivals, right? And the festival of Purim Chanukah, and in this context, we're talking about Chanukah, is a manifestation, a second revelation of Torah. Rav Hutner calls Chanukah the Yom Tov of Torah Sheba'al Peh, the festival of the oral law. And the greatness of Chanukah, the point about Chanukah, is that it's an ignition of phase 2. It's where the sages create Torah. Instead of going to the prophets or reading the miraculous Urim V'Tumim on the breastplate of the Kohen, this time they make it up themselves. The genius of Judaism is not the written Torah. That's God's genius. The genius of the Jewish people is the Mishnah and the Gemara, the oral Torah, where we figure true to the original principles. Absolutely, nothing more than an extracting and a elucidation and a bringing out and an amplification and a honing and a polishing of the lights of the written law. But the greatness of the Jewish people is the oral law, where we created ourselves. What's the relationship between our light and his? Almost zero. His is miraculous and perfect and godly, and ours is human. But ours is the one that's intended. The world wasn't created for God to give a Torah that is Torah and prove anything. The world's created for human beings to take that and to run with it and create a Torah that's completely true to those original principles, and yet is a work of human genius. You know, you can see this in so many ways. I'll give you one. What was the first rabbinic decision ever made? Rabbinic decision. A rabbi getting up with no prophets, no divine assistants. Matityahu, in the time of the Greeks. He got up and he said, "Gentlemen, ladies, I've made a decision." They said, "Rabbi, what's your decision?" "We declare war on the Greek Empire." "Rabbi, you and whose army?" "Well, there's me and my sons, there's 5 of us, 6 of us. We've got a few friends, about 13 of us. We can, Rabbi, did you ask the prophet? Haven't had prophets for dozens of years. Rabbi, did you check with Urim Batumim? Haven't seen those for decades. Rabbi, the Greek army, 10,000 war elephants, against you 13 guys who've never handled a weapon? Yeah, I think we should do it. Rabbi, where did you get this idea from? This is my rabbinic wisdom, and they won. They won. The first rabbinic decision wasn't like, we'll plait the challahs a little differently. We're going to smell different spices on Saturday night. The first rabbinic decision was war on the Greek Empire, by a handful of yeshiva bochrim, kohanim. That's the greatness of the oral law, right? Where there's no point of reference that you can touch anymore in a higher world, right? And the future of the Jewish people can hang on that, like a war against the Greeks. And that is phase 2. So let's see it again. Pesach, phase 1, amazing. And Pesach lacks a certain kind of hallel. And where's that completed? In giving of the Torah, phase 2. There are 2 times that the Jewish people leave Egypt and walk through a desert. The first is divinely guided, pillars of cloud, pillars of fire, Hashem showing, wiping out the enemies. Your job is to follow, charge the batteries, get the message. And that ends. It ends when the Persians have destroyed and the Greeks have destroyed, and the Greeks have contaminated a temple, and there's no spiritual message left, and most of the Jews are treacherous. Most of the Jews have become Hellenists. By the way, one of the most painful things we see in our generation, as morally incompetent as Hamas, is Jewish traitors. Jews in the public street in non-Jewish countries denouncing Israel that's fighting for its life. How morally inept can you be? How morally, what's the word, derelict can you be? You want to disagree with the Israeli government? Who disagrees with the Israeli government? Nobody agrees with them. The government doesn't agree with the government. Go there, vote, motivate, lobby, do whatever you want. But to stand in a street in London or Toronto or New York denouncing your people who are fighting for their lives, Anyway, in Chanukah, the majority of the Jewish people were Hellenized. The majority of the Jews, they were hiding their circumcisions, playing the Greek games naked, admiring Greek philosophy. There was a fight to the death, which was simply a movement to give their lives on the part of the Kohanim, right? So you don't get a darkness deeper than that. It's not simply foreign philosophy trying to convince you. It had drilled inward. Talk about the Jewish people themselves had bought it. And there was a reignition of a sanctity that transcends philosophy in that time, with no proofs, not prophets to relate to, no divine proofs, and no miracles, right? That's what they gave their lives for. And therefore, there's an element missing from Pesach. Pesach has its hallel, where we praise Hashem's miracles and glory, but there's an element missing. Where's our share? That's Chanukah. Chanukah's the second time the Torah was received, where we do it ourselves, where we know what to do, and we move forward into an era where we have the oral law behind us. That's Chanukah. What about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? How does that fit? Remember, we said there are 8 days of Chanukah. 6 of those days are Hallel that we're expressing now from Pesach. Pesach is phase 1, leaping over, Hashem doing it all. Chanukah is phase 2, right? First phase, Hashem lights the menorah. It's miraculous in the Mishkan. Phase 2, the Chashmonaim light the menorah, right? Which is with no spiritual demonstration, simply giving their lives for this. And nothing miraculous about it at all, except the last wave goodbye that those candles burnt more than they should have. And then it continues in the mitzvah that the Jewish people have. So those 6 days are paid back. What Pesach lacks is the human element. And that's what Chanukah adds. What about Rosh Hashanah? 2 more days, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Well, think about that for a moment. What is the work of Rosh Hashanah? The work of Rosh Hashanah is the shofar. What is the work of the shofar? Zichronos. The work of the shofar is to remember. And what did the Greeks come to do? Lashkicham teirasecha, to make you forget. You see the parallel? Again, what is Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah is Zichronos. What do we say in Rosh Hashanah? The prayer of Zichronos, which means memory. Memory doesn't mean reminiscences. Memory means going back to the point of origin. Cast yourself back to the point 1 and express it now. The shofar awakens, right? The shofar awakens the For those who know, the Hebrew word shofar is exactly the same word in Hebrew as shpir, which means amniotic membranes and liquid. Takes you back to the point of birth, the shofar. But here's my proud shofars. Right? This one, by the way, for the South Africans, I proudly show this. This is a blesbok horn. Blesbok. Not ideal for a shofar because it should be from a cow. But anyway, I proudly display this to demonstrate my South African origins. Blesbok. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, point is, the shofar is to awaken a memory. That's what it says. It's zichronis. Bameh b'shofar. That means we do zichronis. We awaken, so to speak, the memory of the point of origin. And the Gemara says, how do we do it? With the shofar. And the shofar is considered, as you all know, I'm sure, as in the Holy of Holies. You know, the Gemara is a fascinating discussion. The Gemara says that the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, should not wear golden vestments. His gold he should not wear. You know why? Because it reminds of the golden calf. And there's a principle in spiritual law, ein kotego nase sonego. The prosecutor should not be used as the defense. You shouldn't use the prosecutor as the defense. I mean, that's completely perverted. The prosecution is gold, reminiscent of the golden calf, so you should take off his gold. And then the Gemara says, but how do you blow the shofar? The shofar is also from a calf. It's a cow. It's a cow horn. You must say, no, that's different. You know why? Because the shofar is considered to be in the inner sanctum, and in the inner sanctum, you can even use the negative for the positive, which means that the shofar is considered lifnim. The shofar is considered, without going into that whole discussion in the Talmud, the shofar is considered to be internal, inside, in the Holy of Holies, the shofar is, because it takes you back to the point of origin, right back to the moment of conception. That's why the shofar is the voice before the words become articulated and differentiated. Shofar is simply the cry of the soul itself. And it's a reawakening, the ultimate memory. That's called zichronos. Right? What was Chanukah? Chanukah was with the Greeks, come lashkicham terasech, to make you forget the Torah. The point of Chanukah is a reawakening and a re-remembering. And that's where the Hallel is paid. The Hallel is not done on Rosh Hashanah. It's too awesome. When do we say the Hallel of Rosh Hashanah? Chanukah. Because Chanukah is the second phase, right, of the same idea. What about Yom Kippur? Maybe I should leave that as the mystery. You want to struggle with this yourselves? I'm looking for some nods of the heads or shakes of the heads. You know what? Maybe we'll leave that as a little mystery for you to think about yourself. We've explained 7 days. 6 days of Pesach, phase 1, giving of the Torah, revelation, repaid by Chanukah's 6 days, which is the expression in the oral law sense, the work we do, the Hallel that we institute, that we say on a festival that we created, right? Symbolizing and manifesting the Jewish genius and greatness, where we forge the journey through the darkness and through the desert, to be sure inspired by the voltage that charged the batteries before, and absolutely true to that. No question about it, not wavering a hair's breadth, but doing it ourselves, fighting our own wars, walking our own journey through the desert, receiving and manifesting a Torah a second time, inspired by the first one, absolutely, totally true to that. But a Mishnah and a Gemara, which is a work of Jewish genius, a reconstruction of Torah, right? Which is the Jewish work. And then there's one more day, a 7th day. And what is that? That is fulfillment of the Hallel we didn't say on Rosh Hashanah because of the awe of the din of Rosh Hashanah. But it's exact fulfillment. The point of Rosh Hashanah is zichronos, is a commemoration, a remembrance. Right? What do we say? Zikaron Yom Rishonon, we say it. Remembering of the first day of creation, remembering of the sound of the shofar, of the giving of the Torah. We say that on Rosh Hashanah. We can't say Hallel then, it's too fearsome. But on Chanukah we do that. Because Chanukah is where the Greeks had brought about a forgetting. Lahashkicham terasecha, to darken your eyes. By the way, listen to this. If this doesn't do it, nothing will. What was the Greek edict against the Jews? Something beyond imagination. The Greeks said to the Jews, Kisvu lachem al keren hashor. Listen to this. This is bizarre beyond description. The Greeks said to the Jewish people, engrave on the horn of the ox, she'en lachem chelek be'elokei Israel, that you have no share in the God of Israel. What are these weird people doing? The Greeks say to the Jews, inscribe on the horn of the ox, Kisvu lachem al keren hashor, write on the horn of the ox that you have no share in the God of Israel. What are they saying? Horn of the ox? Shofar? What the Greeks are saying is, divorce yourself from the spiritual world. The highest point you can get to is intellectual human philosophy. That's Greece, an incredible philosophy that swept away most of the Jews of the era, that has swept away Jews to this day. The entire Western structure is Greek. Everything in Greek, everything in the Western world is Greek. Philosophy, aesthetics, drama, politics, democracy, philosophy. What is in Greek today? Everything. Art in all its forms, philosophy. These are Greek words. Democracy is a Greek. The whole West is Greece today. It swept away the Jews, and they remain swept away, right? And therefore, that's what they meant. Right on the horn of the ox, Keren, Kabbalistically, the Keren is where the skull extends. Keren also means like a ray of light. It means something that projects beyond, right? Keren means the capital as opposed to the derivative or the interest, right? And therefore, the horn of the ox, that's the symbol. And when you blow the shofar, you're ascending to the point of origin. That's where the Greeks said, we want you to engrave on the horn of the ox that you have no share in God. Philosophy, absolutely, yeah. Philosophy, intellect, all the wisdoms of the world, yeah. But transcending that, to make contact with something that's transcending the world, you see there's no such thing. Show us, where is it? There was once maybe prophecy and miracles. You don't see that today. And all we have evidence of today is human genius and human intellect, and there's nothing beyond that. And that is the severance at the point of the horn. And of course, the deeper meaning is your shofar, right? That you blow to connect yourselves to a higher world. It's at that point that we step in and sever that connection. Kisvu lachem al keren hashor, right on the horn of the ox, that you have no share in the Jewish people. That's Rosh Hashanah, which is blowing the horn, right? Blowing the shofar, which is exactly using that exact point to show we use this to reconnect with the point of origin. And that is what the Greeks were against. And therefore, Chanukah is exactly a Hallel, reawakening the Rosh Hashanah Hallel, right? Which is the day on which the shofar is blown. I mean, this is so clear when you see what is the Gaon of Vilna telling us, right? All the Gaon says is, he says very bland, 6 days of Pesach, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, those are days we don't say Hallel, we say them on Chanukah, right? But when you start to see what he's getting at, you start to see the connections. That is an amazing thing. The 8th day, we're going to leave as a little mystery. How does Yom Kippur come into this? Don't forget, he said there's 6 days Pesach, Hallel on Chanukah. 7th is Rosh Hashanah, we've explained. Hallel on Chanukah. The 8th day, Yom Kippur, we don't say. Also, a fearsome day, we don't say Hallel on that day. And what do we know Kabbalistically? We know that Yom Kippur has 3 manifestations. An otherworldly day, which is Yom Kippur. That's why we don't eat and drink. We transcend the world. The feasting of Yom Kippur, which we don't do on Yom Kippur, we do on Purim, Yom Kippurim. And the Hallel of Yom Kippur, which we don't do on Yom Kippur, that's Chanukah. So Yom Kippur has 3 manifestations. An otherworldly Yom Kippur, which we celebrate every year. And a this-worldly Yom Kippur, which is split between Purim and Chanukah. And the homework I leave you with as a little challenge is to figure out, just like Rosh Hashanah manifests on Chanukah, because it is the blowing of the shofar, which is equaled the reminding that the Greeks come to cause the forgetting, right? Those connections are clear. Think to yourself, what is Yom Kippur exactly? What is the secret of Yom Kippur that's echoed in expression on Chanukah? I'll be very pleased to hear your suggestions. Why should I, as I said, why should I do all the work? But the connection is very clear, and I'll leave that to you. Anyway, this has been a brief look at quite an astounding and, as usual, very cryptic and compressed comment in the Gaon of Vilna. 6 days here, another 2, 8 days there. That's Chanukah. But once you understand the underlying theme, right, you see that's what it is. So in summary, we've described the 2 phases of life experience. There's the first phase, the phase of the perfect light, the one that is perfect and amazing, ignition, inauguration, dedication, perfect experience. The romance, if you like, of all spiritual experience, but it never lasts. It's taken away. Because after all, it's illusory. It's necessary, but it's not real. Not real in terms of continuity. And then that's taken away, and that's where you get real. Where you walk through the desert of life's experience, you build yourself step by step, all the tragedies and difficulties and darkness, but it's that walking through the night on memory of the light that you once saw that will get us there in the end. Thank you very much for joining me. A wonderful end of Chanukah. We should also put in special effort here with prayer and maybe a little extra activities for merit for the suffering that's going on. suffering of soldiers and Israelis, and suffering of a, what shall I say, a post-truth world in which things are so confused that even Jews can take the side of the enemy. And look forward to a world of the small light of Chanukah reaching back to its original infinite proportions.